Reset. Today we are talking about silencing that inner critic because if you are like most people, you probably have a bit of a harsh critic inside of you. Many of us do, and it really doesn't serve you. Like there's got to be a better way to live our lives than beating ourselves up from the inside out. And I used to be someone who struggled with this a lot and have managed to turn it around. And of course, it's always a journey. And so have to continue to practice what I preach. But I'm going to give you some ideas, things that have worked for me, work for my clients, and I hope will definitely work for you as well. So welcome to today's Resilience Reset. And this is tied to resilience because as we go through life, there are already enough challenges that we're dealing with. And every time we are critical of ourselves in an unjust and unfair way, we're actually making it harder to deal with whatever it is we need to deal with. Sidebar. If you notice that I'm bouncing, it's because there is construction outside at Innovation Works, which is where I am today. I'll give you a little glance out. See, there it is. It's all construction and the building is shaking. So I am literally shaking. What shows on camera? I haven't got some incredible talent of bouncing myself and my computer at the same time. It's the construction. Anyway. So I call this the internal messenger of bullshit. And forgive the language, I'm on a language spree today. I've been a bit saucy with my mouth, I must admit. But here's the thing. I call it a bullshit because it's generally a very harsh critic. It often is not a critic who is like pointing out the great things in your life. Right? Like we don't worry about the voice in our head that says, "Gosh, I'm great," or "Ooh, well, look at how I rocked that experience," or "How I did this." We're generally looking at it from a perspective of negativity and exaggeration and harshness, judgment. That's what I want to switch for you. Because all of the thoughts that are in our head are completely manufactured by us. And as such, I always figure, why not just choose a good story? Like, why do we have to default to the bad story? We could just, if we're making it all up anyway, why not just make up the good stuff that's going to support our healing or support our enthusiasm for the day? We have that choice. All right, so let me know in the chat box if you are, in fact, someone who has a negative inner critic. And also, as I go through these tips, I'm going to ask you if you have any suggestions to share it with others. Put it in the comments, even if you're watching the replay or are here live. Just go ahead, put them in, and let us, me and others, know what your tips and tricks are for overcoming this internal critic. So the first thing we need to do, oh, well, actually, I've already talked about the first thing we need to do, which is understanding that we need to change it. And here's the problem. Originally, when I had an inner critic, like harsh, very, very mean, very rude, very rude internal dialogue, I dare say, now looking back on it. But the funny thing is, I had no idea. And so you may not even know the number of negative thoughts that you're putting into your head every day. And I would go, for those of you who know my story, when I'd had a surgery, things went really wrong with with the neuropathic pain. And I was told to go on disability. I would never work full time again. I'd never be off medication. It was a really tough time in my life. But what happened was I was so driven to always be on, to always be like to give. Like I was just like, that was my way. And then my body was like, had different ideas. It was like, yeah, you're not doing anything today. You're going to need to learn how to be instead of do. And that was an identity shift. And that was a very, very difficult transition. And the way that transition happened was ultimately I ended up overcoming the internal messenger of BS. But it was forced upon me. So it was like I didn't have a choice. My body was in so much pain. I was collapsing. Like I'd go to an event, I'd put a smile on my face, I'd get home and I'd be like out for hours just lying down because I was in so much pain. And so then it would start. Your oh, this is good though. Here, I want to show this comment from Greg before I tell you the rest of my story. Hi, Allison. I'm getting much better at choosing kindness. Awesome. And reframing the words as they are coming out. It takes some time though. You know what? It does. And I'm going to, that actually feeds into one of my tips in a little bit. So I'm going to hold that and re-show it in a little bit. So as I was saying, like, so what would happen is as my body was collapsing, instead of just being like I would say to another friend, and I wouldn't say to a friend, "Oh, you feel like you have a knife twisting into your pelvis and you're like collapsing in pain." Well, you're a insert F word here, idiot. You're pretty lazy. What the F's wrong with you? You're disgusting. You don't deserve this. Like all of those things that we would go through, like that. I don't think any of us would say to anybody on the outside. I was saying constantly to myself on the inside. And it's really, really, really hard to love yourself and to be at peace with your day to day when you have that kind of an internal dialogue happening. Now, not everybody is going to resonate with this. I get that. But I know, based on conversations I've had over the years, that there are people who will resonate with this. And this resilience reset is for you. Okay. So we have to figure this out. But the thing is, I didn't even know that that was a problem. I just thought it was the way I was. And that's how everybody talked to themselves. Or I didn't even actually give it that much thought to figure out if I should or should not be saying those harsh things to myself. It was just my decades long before the surgery. I had the same internal critic. I was so busy, I didn't even have time to notice it. Well, so fast forward after this conversation with this doctor, the neurologist, I ended up, I was in at the pain center. Anyway, I ended up getting my Dr. Tony. And for those of you who read my first book on resilience, you'll know I talk about him a lot, and he was pivotal in my life. And actually, they've shut down that program, and I miss him dearly. But what he taught me over those years is the only reason I can do what I do now, and probably the only reason why I didn't end up going on disability and giving up my life, because there are probably a lot of times during this journey where I probably might have. Um, anyway, but I go into my first, like probably for the first year with him, and he'd ask me questions like, how's it going, whatever. And I'd be like, oh, I'm and I would allow in that therapeutic area to allow these horrible phrases that I'd always kept internal to come out. And he'd be like, who are you talking about? And I'm like, me. And he's like, he kept not harping on me, that's a bad word, but kept bringing it to my attention when I would say something really, really negative about myself. And I'm so grateful that he did, because I didn't even know it was a problem. And so if you're going through your life and you're feeling really like you just don't have the juju and you don't have the confidence and you feel like you're sort of, the life is sucked out of you, it's very plausible that you could be really, really, really harsh on yourself and you don't even realize it. So what we need to do, are you ready for this? We need to give your internal voice an external presence. So what I mean by that is I started using sticky notes, little Post-it notes. Thank you, 3M. 3M, I love you. I put them in my one of my books, 3M Post-it notes, and then they sent me a big package of them. And I've long since overcome those. But if anybody from 3M is watching, you feel free to send me another one of those gift baskets. I love them. Anyway, I digress. These things changed my life, because every time I would start to have self-awareness of my negative voice in my head, I would grab a Post-it note and I would write on it. And I would actually write the thing I was saying inside my head externally. And then we can look at that and go, is that true? is that objectively what I really, really, really believe and feel to be true about myself? And if I hadn't done that exercise, and by the way, this doesn't happen overnight, this is a progression of changing the internal dialogue. What we want to do is create a more harmonious environment for which you live, because our internal voice is, as best I can tell, our companion for our entire lives. And if it is beating you up every day, in the morning, in the noon, in the night before you go to bed, and life is beating you up because, that's life, there's always stuff going on around us. How are you going to fulfill your life's mission? How are you going to be happy? How are you going to be at peace? How are you going to have some fun? It's hard. Like, I often talk about negative influence, right? Like, so are you watching the news too much? Are you surrounding yourself with negative people? What are you doing to put positive in your life? One of the reasons I love doing this resilience reset is I'm hearing from people like, you're my jolt of positivity for the day. Well, hallelujah. I'm happy to be that. And what else is going on? But here's the thing, we have all of that. We can't forget about what's happening here. If we're inputting in our own mind negativity, we're robbing ourselves of really having enjoyment in our lives. So when we do this, the next thing I want you to do is I want you to call up your best friend, and I want you to read and say to them exactly what you're saying to yourself. Challenge yourself to do it. You can't. You would probably never say the things you say to others, or to yourself, to others. You often wouldn't necessarily even have the same level of judgment, the harshness for them. Like I said earlier, if your friend was complaining that they were in so much pain, they were collapsing, you would say, "Oh my God, collapse, get on the couch, watch a movie, veg out, take care of your body." You wouldn't say to them, "Well, you know what? Why don't you suck it up, buttercup? Let's get heave ho. Hey, if you're going through hell, keep on going. No pain, no gain," when your body is telling you that it can't function. Which gets us into a whole other topic around mental toughness versus what I consider mental discipline. I did a little post about that earlier today, and we'll definitely do another talk about it. I think I've already done one of these riffs on it, but I'm so incredibly committed to that because mental discipline, it's what I use. I don't know if anybody else uses that phraseology. I'm sure somebody does along the way, but the way I look at it is mental discipline doesn't let you off the hook. It doesn't say, I'm, oh, I don't feel like doing it, so I won't do it. It has you rise to the challenge when is required, and it allows for you to have the grace to take a break and or to step back from something and reset, readjust, or decide you aren't going to do it. So it's that finding that really good internal voice that you're playing with for your life. So we've got these little things worked out. You can burn them after, you can rip them up, whatever you want to do, it doesn't matter. It's about giving the internal voice the external presence. Then we look at it objectively, try to say it to somebody else. And then I want you to really dig a little deep, not a little deep, a lot deep, and figure out why. I don't want to get too hung up on the why, but I need you to understand somehow why you believe it's okay for you to say that horrible thing to yourself, but not okay for you to say it to somebody else. So what is so wrong or broken with you that you believe that you deserve to be beat up, but it's not okay for you to do it to somebody else? Or maybe you do it to somebody else. I mean, that's a whole other story. Maybe you really take satisfaction in knocking people down and telling them they're idiots. I don't know. I hope not. I hope not. But maybe you do. But generally, the people who have the most criticism outwards often have the worst criticism inward as well. So generally, when somebody's being real jerky, I am often just sort of saying a little bit of a prayer behind the scenes that, I hope they heal their own bodies, right? But this is the whole concept of resilience. No, it's not the whole concept. That was a throwaway line. You know what I'm talking about. It's a very important foundational element of resilience. Okay. So now we've objectively looked at it. And we could say, I'm never going to say that about myself again. Well, yeah, you probably will. Because our patterns are so ingrained in how we show up every day, right? Like it just we've had potentially decades of using the same phrases or having the same lens through which we look at ourselves or the same standards that we apply to our own self. And so what that means to me is you can't expect that to change in a dime. Now, sometimes it does. Sometimes it's just the light bulb goes off and you'll never say it again. I remember I had a coaching client who, in our first hour get to know you session, we were having a conversation and she had told me how awful she was at so many different things. So awful at sales, awful at HR, awful at getting her team to do the work they needed to do, awful at focusing herself, awful at being a mom, awful at, her timing. Like it just, the list went on and on. And about an hour and I said, hey, listen, could you do me a favor, please? And she's like, sure. And I'm like, could you just write me out a cheat sheet, a full list of everything you're awful at, please? Like, I just need to know. And she looked at me like I'd had two heads. And turns out she didn't even know she was saying the word awful. She didn't know that that was her word to describe herself. And so the challenge I gave to her, which is the same challenge I'll give to you, is in her day timer. So she used like a little day timer to write all her notes in and whatnot. I had her put the word awful at the top. And every time she noticed herself saying it, just to put a little sticky note, right? Stick, 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 like, or not a sticky note, a little stick. You know how you count by fives? And it was through that experience that she was able to recognize how often she was over the course of 24 to 48 hours saying she was awful. And it was so eye-opening because she didn't even know she was doing it. Much like I didn't know there was a problem with the way I was talking to myself until Dr. Tony pointed it out for me. And now here I am pointing it out for you. Okay, so whatever your word is, we want to know what that is. Situational awareness, let's get clear. Then we have to figure out the self-awareness. Where is it coming from? Do you really believe it? Sit with those horrible feelings. Like if you're going to say shitty things about yourself, why don't you even like actually have a conversation about it in your head? And I don't mean like in a, I'm, talking to myself, but I kind of do kind of way. Like just go into it and be like, yeah, do I really feel that? Is that true? And where does that come from? And why do I believe that? And what sort of expectations do I have of myself that I'm letting myself down on? What's really going on? Is this about something else? Like get really curious and have a conversation. Just don't let it be a fleeting negative point. Okay. If you have read my book, Take Back Your Weekends, Stress Less, Do More, and Be Happier, you'll know that one of the solution activation principles is your second response is the priority, get to it ASAP. Oh, and then the next one, also applicable, a slip does not mean you need to stop. So here's the thing. We want to interrupt these patterns as quickly as we can. And so if that means that you start to hear it, you've figured out what your pattern of language is. You start to hear it in your mind, you go, oh, there it is. I want to bring it to my awareness. Then we say, is that true? Is that really what I want to be saying? What can I counteract it with? So some of you, if you've ever struggled with your weight, you might have this experience where I used to look in the mirror and go, oh my God, you're so fat. And by the way, I only wish I could be as fat as I was when I used to say that at a size 6, 5'8.5", size 8. I was very thin, but I still always said it. And then I got very, very big and have sort of gone all the different ends of the spectrum. So more of me to love. Anyway, I used to be very critical of my body in many, many ways. And so I would say, you're so fat. And that was just how I showed up in front of a mirror. That was the thought that I unconsciously had, and it just was my way. And so then when I started to bring awareness to this negative internal messenger of bullshit, I would say, "Oh, you're so fat." And then I would force myself to stay looking in the mirror until I could say something positive. So to try to count. So the first thing is we find the thing we're saying, and then we're going to add in something that we actually believe to be true to start counterbalancing that negativity. Okay. See what I'm doing here? We're going to pile on. Then what we're going to do is hopefully this thing that we start to believe is true, the positive can outshine the negative, and we'll slowly start to chip this away. But then as this negative comes up, what we want to do is we want to get to a point where we don't even say it, we interrupt it. So instead of saying I'm so fat, I'd go I'm so fabulous, right? And like start changing the word. And it's just to get your brain to stop beating you up, right? To find alternative storylines. You know, if we're making it all up anyway, why don't we just make it up to serve our purpose? And this is what Greg is talking about here in this wonderful comment that he made earlier. I'm getting better at choosing kindness and reframing the words as they are coming out. That's exactly right. So as it's coming out, we can start to interrupt the pattern and choose an alternative line. Another way we can do this is if we keep the extreme negativity going, and all our words are made up anyway. This is one of my strategies to get rid of worrying, but it'll also work for this. I want you to create two alternative storylines. One that's super positive and like, yeah, yeah, and one that's like medium of the road, right? So I'm so fat. Well, you know, I am actually really at a great, perfect, healthy size. And then something like, I have really great ankles. I don't know, whatever. My ankles aren't fat. So, come up with some alternative storylines so that our brain isn't fixated only on the big punch. Okay, so that can be a really great strategy as well for starting to loosen the binds of negative self-talk. Right? So that because what we ultimately want to do is we want you to get to having uh like the way I think of it is if we can get to a point where being in your mind is like giving yourself a hug of support, like that is a beautiful state. From there, we're not letting ourselves off the hook that we don't want to improve, that we're thinking we're perfect when we're not. It's not that. It's about being friends, like best friends with the internal critic. It's no longer a critic, it's just the internal voice. And imagine how different your life will be when you actually enjoy the conversation that's going on in your head. And you can spend your days laughing at yourself like I do. I don't know. I just have so much fun because I used to be so mean to myself. Not necessarily to other people, although sometimes sure. But like was so angry and felt shame and like just disgust for my body. But this is the only thing we have, people. We got to do the best we can do. All right, we've got some comments here. Let's bring them up. Interrupt the negative. Yes. And I do this even for like real conversations, right? If I'm talking with somebody and it's going on a really negative loop, then we want to step it up. Laugh my ass off. She says, "My big toe is sexy." Dang straight. It sounds funny, but I can say that. My ankles aren't. Glad yours are, Allie. LOL. You know what? I don't think my ankles are going to win any big prizes, but that's okay. My ankles are my ankle. And then I think things like, oh my God, think of the miles that those ankles and those feet have taken us through in our lives. Like think about the body, what it's gone through. And, for those of you who've given birth to children and, every day it wakes up and says, "Hey, how are you?" And uh, you slap it back with some negative self-talk, that's kind of like setting yourself up for a really shitty day. But if you say, you know what, I'm good today and I'm grateful for this body the way it is, that's pretty cool too. Yeah. So anyway, I think I've riffed long enough, but I love this conversation and it's so, so, so critically important. And I can talk about it because I know how awful I was at it and I'm not ashamed of that. I'm not embarrassed by that. I think that that's a really human thing. And, part of the point of these resilience resets is I want to be as transparent about my human experience and that of my clients so that I can hopefully, if you are feeling any of this, like if it doesn't resonate, don't watch. It's okay. If it does, take what I say and let me know how you can apply little bits of it and how it may help to change your life. So, um, anyway, I think that's where we're going to end it. I am so grateful to have each of you come and join me for this resilience reset. And I also love when I hear people who go to the replays. So thank you for that as well. And I'm just going to keep showing up every Monday through Thursday at 3:15 p.m. To give you a little reset. So until tomorrow, may you stress less, do more, and be happier. Have the best rest of today. Bye.